Hey gang, welcome back to the channel. I am your host Ed as always. It's time for another CirdecSongs Chat. I have the honor of speaking to three gentlemen from one of my favorite Chicago bands. Before I get into that though, please like and subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. The algorithm likes it and I like it. Makes everybody happy. And you're going to want to have lots of comments for these guys because they are super talented. They are from Chicago. They are one of the reasons I enjoy living here. They are progressive metal, among other things, but I'm going to let them get into that. They are District 97. I am going to start by talking to Mr. Jonathan Shang. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing all right. Glad to be here with you guys.
I appreciate you coming. How about you tell me what you play and then introduce the other two gentlemen that are with us?
Sure, I'm the drummer, and I write a good deal of music as well. And we also have Jim Tastian on guitar and Andrew Lawrence on keyboards.
Talented gentlemen, all. I appreciate you guys being here. Now,
Happy to be here.
He said enthusiastically. I caught you guys for the first time in 2017 at Oktoberfest, and you guys already had a name for yourself. Tell me about your origin story. Tell me how things got rolling.
Sure. So it started really kind of focused at the Chicago College of Performing Arts, which is part of Roosevelt University. And so it was an instrumental group with me and three guys who are no longer in the band. But pretty quickly into that, about a year and a half or so, we were instrumental. Then I got the idea we should have a singer. Like I wanted to write music that had a vocal component, and I knew none of us could hack it. So I had known Leslie from school, and she had just wrapped up on American Idol, so she was on my radar. And I reached out to her actually to open up for us. So she did like her singer-songwriter act, and then instrumental D97 played, and we both really enjoyed each other's sets, so that started a dialogue, and eventually I remember I asked her to join. She remembers she asked me if she could join, but either way, she ended up joining, and then within a few months, Jim came on guitar. So this was in the latter half of 2008 that they both joined. And so then we had that lineup for about 7 years, and then we had a swap out on bass.
Nice. Jim, what made you enthusiastic about joining the band?
Well, Jonathan was a well-known figure around the halls of the Chicago College of Performing Arts, having just returned from Berklee College of Music in all its glory. He came back to impress us all. So I just had met those guys, Rob and Patrick and Jonathan, a bit, and was very. I don't remember. Was it just like a unofficial recital that you guys did with Braintree, or was that for like a composition project thing or something? Do you remember?
Yeah, so
Because
the
you guys,
Braintree was
yeah,
that was a duo project I had with a friend, John Nichols, who's a great composer. That kind of somewhat paved the way for D97, in that it was exploring like unabashed rock and metal influences, even though like I was a jazz major, so I felt a little shy about doing this, but that kind of, I guess, gave me the courage to explore that again. But for that particular recital, I think it was just something we put on, not directly
yeah.
a
Because
school
I feel like
event.
it was like a Friday night or something where they typically weren't recitals, so it kind of felt like a show, but it was up in Marks Hall, the performance space at Chicago College of Performing Arts. So I saw that.
Yeah,
That was the first time I think I actually heard Jonathan play, and it was. Can I swear on this podcast, or should I not?
Please, knock yourself
It
out.
was fucking awesome, and it just blew my head off as far as just the creativity, and it was quirky and insane and really fun. And so I kind of just checked out some other stuff. I think Jonathan did. Your Nonette did a performance too, Absolute Zero, maybe at one point that I saw. Is that right?
yeah, it wasn't quite a non-net. I don't know if it was a sextet, I think. think it was a
Man, I thought
sextet, but yeah,
it was like a
we
it's a
did a couple
small.
things.
It was kind of like a prog jazz ensemble. It's kind of like some music that I was in line with a lot of music I was into at that point. Kind of reminded me of like David Binney or some of like the Donny McCaslin stuff. It was
Ah,
jazz, but also rich with its rock and metalish roots, which was cool. So yeah, I think I just like was aware of those guys, and Jonathan asked me to be in the band, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, why not? Let's do it if
awesome,
I can do it."
awesome.
But basically, obviously, if I can hang on this music, I'll try my best. I've never really
And
played
and
anything.
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
within about a week or less, we had him playing all of Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time, Dance of Fury for the Seven Trumpets, which is not an easy piece of music.
Well, the title isn't even
Um,
easy. That's
right. That
that's a
gives you a
lot.
clue. Yeah,
Exactly. All
yeah.
right, Andrew, same question for you.
So when I was asked to join the band, I did not really know the band. I was one of the hosts at a jam session at this bar, Lily's, which coincidentally is the bar that Leslie opened up for District 97 at back in the day. But I was playing just like a jazz jam session, and Tim Sizer, who was the bass player who was joining, was on the gig, and we were chatting. He's like, "Hey, I'm joining this band District 97. You should like check them out. They need a keyboard player." So I checked them out. I was like, "All right, cool." And then I hit up the guys. There was a somewhat informal audition process, and learned the music. And then we played one gig at Reggie's in February of 2016, and then basically the next day or like the next week, we went on tour to Europe. And that was the first gigs we played. The first gig we played in England at the
Right.
Cottingham
Cotswold?
pub. Cotswold,
Cotswold
the
Inn.
Cotswold Inn, the Cotswold
Yeah.
Inn. The keyboard stand that I was using broke,
Mal
and the keyboard
malfunctioned.
Oh
collapsed.
no!
It malfunctioned. It didn't quite break, but yeah, and the keyboard collapsed like right before we started playing.
Of
So,
course it
but
did.
we got it together, and it worked out. And yeah, I've been in the band since. It's been a fun ride. I'm on 2 studio records, Screens, and our most recent release, Stay for the Ending, which in my humble opinion is our best release to date.
It
But
better
yeah,
be.
it's been it's been a fun run so far.
Yeah. Well,
Nice.
Andrew's not alone in that opinion. It seems we call it a general consensus, not unanimous, but a lot of people seem to think the new album is our best one so far.
Well, cool. We're going to take as deep a dive as you like shortly. I said you guys were progressive metal in the opening, and instantly I regret saying that because I like for the band to define themselves. It's not my job to define you. How do you guys see yourselves as a band? How do you define yourselves?
Yeah, it's
It's
definitely progressive rock, and it touches on it gets very heavy at times into the metal realm. So I would say progressive metal is not incorrect. It's maybe kind of a hallmark of our entire career has been our inability to be defined or directly related to another band. It's both served us well and hindered us. So because that's just kind of the way the music business is these days. The more different and undefinable you are, the harder it is for people to, I don't know, explain it or sell it, or they're just too lazy. I'm not sure, but we certainly get a lot of people that just like the music and don't really care how it's categorized. And I think that's the way to go. Is just listen to the shit and tell us what you think.
Yeah, like one thing I've seen with a couple of the more skeptical reviews of the new album "Stay for the Ending" is they mention that we kind of go from heavier sections to more poppy sections to more fusion sections, and we're kind of all over the map. And I mean, it's true we do bring in a broad array of influences, but I feel at this stage of the game anyway, it coalesces into a coherent whole. Um, so to me, I don't think most people that have progressive taste should be put off by by what we do. But yeah, so I don't know. Like Jim said, it is kind of hard to pigeonhole because the five of us have quite varied backgrounds and musical interests. So it all comes into a stew of some sort. But yeah, you will get a song that's kind of a more straightforward rock tune, and then you'll get something like, for instance, The Watcher, which closes out the last or most recent album, which is like a 9.5, quite angular and demanding sort of piece.
Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with what the other guys said. I think of it as sort of modern progressive rock. Progressive rock is a pretty loaded term with there's, like certainly sort of, canonical like Yes and Genesis and Focus and this sort of, progressive rock that's like very sort of whimsical and, there's these long compositions and stuff. I think that we take some of the aesthetic of just, sort of complicated, nuanced composition, but format it in a more modern fashion with more modern metal riffing and maybe more jazz harmony and influence. I don't think that we're necessarily like thinking about what genre we are in when we're composing or when we're playing. I think we're just trying to make music to the highest ability that we can. And, so when we write a song, we're just trying to write a good song like that, fits within the canon of what the band sound. But I think that we're thinking more in terms of just a band sound rather than like a genre we need to fit in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I struggle with progressive rock fans sometimes, and for the record, this is me talking, not the band. This is me. The irony at times is that the least forward-thinking music fans can be progressive rock fans when progressive is in the title. Do you deal with the burden of expectation that comes from that, or do you just feel the need to just do what you do, period, no matter what?
I think we do what we do without giving too much consideration to what the audience response will be. Though I've tinkered with the idea lately of like, because sometimes I think like, maybe like the song Jim wrote, Many New Things, that's on Stay for the Ending. Like maybe that's something that could appeal to Hiatus Coyote fans or Jacob Collier fans, and then I'm thinking like maybe I should try to lean into that and write a song very much in that style, but I haven't actually done it yet. So, but I am toying with it, which could be dangerous ground. I don't know.
Some of your earlier compositions, songs, were maybe a little simple, like simpler rock, like rock riff based stuff. I think that's kind of where we started, and there's always an element of that. But it's it's gone all over the place since we've been at this 15 years, Cedric. It's a long, maybe it's longer. So at this point, yeah, I feel like we all kind of have an idea of what the band sound is, and we kind of just know if something's going to work, and it's kind of pretty easy to write, in that frame of mind, thinking for the other musicians in the band what we want to sound like. But the progressive fans, definitely, there's a lot of people out there that just, aren't really into female singers. There's people that aren't really into the heavier metal sort of stuff. But it just seems like throughout our entire time playing all these festivals and kind of touring with bands that are a lot different than we are, but still in the progressive, under the progressive umbrella, that we find a lot of people that just really love it, and they just are can't really define, what we sound like, but they just like the music, and that's, I think, the best way to go about it is if you like the music, you like the music. It doesn't really matter what it's called or whatever.
Part of the issue with like defining genres through just like a word like progressive rock, it's like you see the same thing with jazz. Like a word jazz is just a huge umbrella that covers a whole wide variety of different music. Anything from, traditional, like, and even if you say traditional jazz, like there's so many different levels of that. You know,
Yeah.
you could do like more 1920s, 1930s, like Louis Armstrong kind of music. You can do big band traditional jazz.
Orleans.
I mean, at this point, free jazz is, you know, over 60 years old. You know what I mean?
Which
There's
is a
a whole
scary thought.
tradition of avant-garde jazz, and avant-garde meaning the new wave. It is no longer the new wave when there's like a traditionalist avant-garde saying, you know, you have to play in the style of Cecil Taylor. Like it's, you know, it's like, but then, you know, I mean, you have jazz, like there's jazz fusion of, you know, like the Chick Corea Return to Forever variety, or
Right.
there's now the sort of Robert Glasper hip hop jazz fusion. I mean, you know, even smooth jazz is still under that same umbrella. And then you have, you know, what like, you know, so I mean, when you say jazz, like it's almost a meaningless term because of just the wide variety of music that it covers. You have to be more specific when you say that, and I kind of feel the same way about progressive rock. If you say prog rock, unless you're specifically talking about a certain era of the music, it's just too big of a category. You have to define it further. So, you know, in a certain sense, like, yes, we're progressive rock, but we're modern progressive, female fronted, heavy metal progressive rock. You know what I mean?
Right. It's
Ultra progressive.
Yeah.
ultra progressive, right? Right. Uber
And I mean,
progressive.
also, you
is
know,
what we're
like
doing.
the other problem with saying like progressive or modern or any of these sort of time based definitions is that time keeps on happening, and give it 10, 20 years, it's no longer progressive, it's conservative, it's no longer modern, it's ancient, you know?
Yeah. You had me thinking. I came into jazz during the Young Lions movement of the '80s. You know, with the Marsalis brothers and
Sure.
Kenny Kirkland and what have you. And now it dawns on me that the Young Lions are the elder statesmen now, because that was
Oh yeah.
40 years ago. That's kind of a horrifying thought. But like you said, music doesn't stop. Time doesn't stop. Everything keeps moving. You know, even when I caught myself getting into quote unquote modern hip hop, you know, whether it was Common or Kendrick Lamar or what have you, I'm still a decade behind. You know,
Yeah.
I can't figure it out. But that's an entirely different conversation. Let's talk about the new album, which came out in October. Stay for the Ending. I like that title. Where did that come from?
So I wrote a song for the record that Stay for the Ending, that Leslie wrote the lyrics for and the name. And when we were just talking about the names, it just seemed like the most fitting name of any of our song titles. I believe this is the first album that we've named off of a song title too.
Well, the debut is Hybrid Child, which is named for a movement of the larger work Mind Scan, which
Right,
is on
fine, a
there.
movement, but not a full.
But it was like
song
pulling
name.
teeth to get him to choose that title. Let me tell you, that was my first instinct, was like, we got to call it Hybrid Child. It's too fitting. And he was like, it will never be called Hybrid Child. That's a direct quote.
That is,
Read my lips.
No hybrid child.
Well, maybe you should just call it No Hybrid Child, and then we kind of go from there. That works.
But
where do these songs? Go ahead. Yes, I heard it. But okay, where do the song ideas come from? Is there so many bands do it so many different ways? Do we bring in demos? Do you jam things out? How does the process?
Well, I think every composer has their own different process. But typically, at least, especially with this record post-COVID, we're all making demos at home that we can send to everybody else. So for me, the one song I wrote on the album was Stay for the Ending, and I was trying to write a song that was structurally pretty simple, but still like technically complex and still having sort of the characteristic District 97 sound. So I tried to make, a song that was using not like a ton, it doesn't have a ton of different sections. It's only a few sections, and it all like kind of comes from the same material, but just putting it together in a way that where we could just focus on playing all this really hard unison stuff. So that's where I was thinking with that song. I know Jonathan, with some of his compositions, usually comes from like a sort of a different conceptual place.
Extra musical influences.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, I brought in three pieces on this album. One I already mentioned is called The Watcher, which closes out the album and is the longest track. And so that I was inspired to write that after reading a piece in New York Magazine about this family that moved to a dream house in suburban New Jersey. And shortly thereafter starts receiving threatening letters in the mail from someone who calling him or herself the Watcher, going like, welcome to the neighborhood, I'll be keeping a close eye on you. And it kind of escalates from there, like, boy, the walls need fresh blood. Your children can't be protected. Like,
Well, that's not scary.
But it was a very bizarre story, and they never found out who was doing it. And there was suspicion that the father was writing the notes himself, and they ended up selling the house at a big loss. And they actually made it. I have a way of like writing stuff that then like film and TV people latch onto, and then I look like I just copied them. But yeah, Netflix put out a series on this, which I haven't watched because I heard it's no good.
It's not great.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame.
But anyway, that was my inspiration behind that one. Well, there's one called Life Cycle, which is kind of our truest ballad to date. I even play some brushes on there. So it's kind of comes from like a jazz waltz ballad tradition, but then kind of explores some other areas. But when it came time to write the lyrics, I found myself drawing upon the book Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, which I had read not too long beforehand, which I thought was quite a mind-blowing read. Huh. Basically about, well, he wrote 2001, so it's sort of in that kind of vein. Basically about the next step in mankind's evolution and what role extraterrestrials could play in this and all that kind of stuff. And what was I going to say on that? Well, anyway, so I just felt it kind of suited the music well, that topic. And then the third one was I really just wrote the music on its own and gave it to Leslie to write lyrics to, which she did after I wrote a draft that she strapped all but 2 lines on, but at least those made it in.
Yeah, that's true. Just a little bit helps, I would think.
Yeah.
How much latitude do you like to give each other? I'm going to get in trouble for this question. How much latitude do you like to give each other when it comes to bringing your compositions in? It's here's the demo, do what you do, or here's the demo, I'd appreciate it if you play this part and then do what you do. How does that work for you?
Plenty. I think it depends on certainly in the earlier, like in the first configuration of the band with Patrick and Rob, we did a lot of collective writing where a lot, maybe not a lot, but several times we would bring in unfinished, sections of songs and kind of piece them together to make a full tune. And I guess how many, I mean, several that were written like that, right, Jonathan? So I'm just trying to remember, but like a couple where we
back and forth would be a prime example, I'd say, of that.
Where we kind of all had pieces, cool ideas that hadn't been put into an organized composition yet, and we kind of worked all that out. That was also at the time when we were learning every tune by rote, and it would often take months to go note by note and without anything written on the page, which I also found helped me internalize the music more, and kind of like some of that stuff will never go away because it was learned meticulously over 3 months, just going note by note, 2 times a week in a practice room. But I think now that we were demoing stuff, like everyone kind of had a pretty solid idea of what everyone should play, and it's pretty self-explanatory based on the composition. Like Andrew's song was very clearly just like play these riffs as tight as you can, don't fuck up, and that's kind of how it's been ever since. Jonathan, I think we've forced Jonathan to let us have more input on some of his songs over the years, just because there's so many songs. Like it's just like, listen, I want to play this, and he's very easygoing about it, so that's good.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely have been some sweeping changes made to some of my songs on our prior albums. Like Forest Fire, it would be one that Jim especially helped to mold into the final presentation. And also, but there are still some big changes that can happen. Like I think maybe the one that had the most is a mirror on the recent album. For the two that aren't here, Tim brought that in, but then once Leslie got her fingerprints on it, she totally changed the form of the song. So even though we've been working more with fleshed out demos that each individual might bring in, there's still a chance that it could get a significant facelift.
Sure. And I mean, I think at this point we trust each other's musical instincts. So if like Jim is like, hey, this works better on guitar like this, I'm not going to complain. You know what I mean? Or,
Right.
you know, or like, you know, Leslie is like, hey, I think like, you know, now that there's lyrics and stuff, like this feels more like a verse and then a bridge. And so the structure needs to morph a little bit. You know, we're amenable to those sorts of changes to try and just make the strongest final product.
That's fair.
Right.
That's fair. I had a very brief foray with being in a band back in the olden days at the turn of the century, and I remember bringing a composition to my bandmates, especially my co-guitarist, and I think it was just ego when I would play something and say, "Okay, well, you know, play what you think here," and he would play something on, "Damn, that's better." I mean, how much does ego play into it these days, or are you able to just kind of step back from yourself and let people do what they do?
My ego died in this band 7-8 years ago. I'm just telling me what to play, you know, like that's fine. I'll do it. I don't think. I mean, I think we've been around each other so. I mean, it's you know just so much at this point. I think no one's afraid to say anything or you know to admit that someone is better. I mean, Andrew and Jonathan are both 10 times the musician that I am. So
Stop
I'm
it.
fully willing to be told no or swatted with a newspaper or something. So
Right. But also, like, you know, as Jim mentioned, we've been doing this 15 years. So, like, you know, there is an effort made to still be tactful and mindful of how other people might react to something. So, you know, I try to keep that in mind. So, I don't know, seems to be working because we're still at it.
we
That's
follow the
fair.
rules of basic human interaction still, but more on the level that a family would, and not like
Oh.
coworkers.
I don't know. I just have this image of you guys in the rehearsal hall walking around with rolled up newspapers, like, no, bad.
Yeah, that's the image I was trying to conjure because that's usually me.
And it's just incredibly funny to me. But I'm just gonna sit in the control room and watch. What's with the rolled up newspaper there? Like, oh, don't worry about it.
Like wait till someone gets out of hand, you'll see.
You have there's a consensus here that this is your best work yet, and I like to ask what inspires that thought? What gives you that idea?
I think for me, the number one thing is that we learned a lot from the previous process of recording. So I think that first of all, the demoing and of all the stuff kind of got a lot of the technical recording stuff out of the way as far as just what like our game plan for you know what's going to be doubled, like what kind of stuff needs to go. So that kind of saves some time. I think the fact that a lot of these were demoed in a studio environment beforehand, but also the process of doing everything in Chicago where we could all be present in a physical space to listen back to mixes, listen back to takes, like listen. I think that helped a lot because I think we've done all the previous records had been mixed out of state where we were getting, um, you know, roughs back, you know, from in email and then listening on our own different systems at home, different sets of headphones, different speakers, and all kind of having different opinions about how things sounded in the mix. And that I think which is natural. That's going to happen when you're listening in completely different environments. But the fact that we did a lot of listening back all together, or at least with several of us working together. Like Tim was at several of my guitar sessions. Jonathan was at several of my guitar sessions. So just like kind of that instant feedback of like me and the engineer, like, oh yeah, that was cool. What if we do this? Jonathan, what do you think? And he was like, yeah, I like that. So I think that helped the process a lot, just to have that everyone be happy with what was getting laid down and not have to go back and do any sort of surgery to make it like the way someone else wanted it. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think we had a great engineer in Noam Wallenberg from Rax Tracks Recording Studio, which is a studio in Chicago, and he recorded, mixed, and mastered the record. And a lot of people have different philosophies about like they like having different people mix and master, so you get different ears on the project. I think for a band that's as unique as us, it really helped having somebody who is so intimately involved in all of the stages to see it through, so that they could get a really high quality recording of all the instruments, and then spend enough time with the material that they could hear what matters in the mixes and how to best express that. And so I think he did a really great job, and just on an audio level, it just sounds really good.
Yeah, Gnome was essential, and I knew right away we were in good hands when before we'd even tracked a note. He was so meticulous in the way he tuned the drums. I had never experienced anything like that before. So just really every aspect of it, from tuning the drums to mastering it, he just kind of had the correct instincts for how we should sound. And so from an objective standpoint, it's definitely the best sounding recording we've ever done.
Nice. When you approach a part, and this is for all of you, when you approach a part, do you feel like you're playing as you? Well, ultimately you are playing as you, but do you bring an influence into a particular tune? This is something Bill Bruford would do. This is something that Adrian Belew would do. This is something that Jordan Rudess would do. How does that feel when you start to approach what you want to do?
I don't think so much as like I'm trying to play like other, especially like when you're talking about like parts for a song. Like, like when you're soloing, there might be like, this is a lick that somebody might play, but like I'm not really trying to think about copying other people's licks. Like I'm more trying to think about like moods and ideas and that kind of thing. Like when most of, especially like playing keyboards and stuff, like I'm trying to like sonically fit into the mix and blend with the bass and the guitars and support the vocals and everything, so I'm trying to think more in terms of those things. And then but when you're sculpting sounds, like there are certain things where it's like, oh, this sound is kind of reminiscent of like the 70s or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I, at least personally, am not trying to like exactly like mimic other artists so much as I'm trying to like create a certain sound world. And I feel like we all have pretty strong influences that like come through in our playing, but I don't know if it's sort of direct mimicry.
Yeah, I would say just in more of a macro sense that I've a while back, I mean, probably somewhere in the middle of my tenure in this band, kind of uh, have always been into the band Meshuggah, and Frederick Thorndell. The way he solos over those really complicated riff songs tends to be more like noise based and not as much about melody or harmony. And that I kind of took that concept as like, after all of the notes and riffs and stuff that you've heard in these songs, I feel like the last thing that I want people to hear now is more notes and riffs. So I kind of tend to approach it more from like a noise sort of coming from a noise place, like with weird effects and sounds, to kind of have that solo be like a kind of different scene than what's been happening beforehand. But I don't think I ever specifically uh, think about one artist or something like, oh, I'm gonna try to play this like like Fripp or something. I think because this music, Andrew plays a lot more of like fusion sort of stuff, and so does Tim. Those guys play a lot of very note heavy, complicated music. I don't really in my other, musical avenues. So that I'm always just kind of trying to bring myself to it the most that I can, and try to just not think about those things as much as I can, and just kind of trust my instincts and try to have a voice that comes through even under a very different context. So
Fair enough. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree with what they said. Yeah, I'm tending to think more just about what's going to elevate the song itself rather than, well, now it's time to channel Bill Bruford or something. But I might listen back and be like, oh, this thing I played here, I think I may have picked that up from Nate Smith, who I saw a month or two ago. Like, so there's stuff like that I'll notice and then maybe lean into.
That's fair. That's fair. Having a female voice in front of something heavy, do we still consider that novel? And if so, I mean, because it's
I
not
don't
something
think we do.
yeah, well, yeah. For the
I
sake
think
of the
some
audience,
people
the audience
do.
may still find it a bit novel. Is there conscious thought about that when you approach the songs, or it's just like this is what it is, let's go for it?
Well, I think she's a versatile enough singer that, yeah, to us it's not really novel because she has the ability to match the intensity of what we're putting out. So it's at this point I'm not really thinking of it differently than I would a male singer.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, Jim also does a fair amount of singing in the band. It's mainly like support, and it's not usually like the lead of the song, but still, like we do have a fair amount of male vocal on our record. It is obviously
True.
still a female fronted band, but like most of the songs, there's some vocal blend.
So we have the equality going, which is always a nice thing. I like to ask musicians, especially after a fresh recording, is there a time when you sit in the control room and you think to yourself, "Man, we're good." Like when I think about Radiohead recording "OK Computer" or Crimson recording "Discipline." Do they sit in the studio and go, "Man, we're good," or is it just one of those, "Okay, that'll do," and you move on?
I've certainly sat in front of my speakers and listened to Radiohead and thought, man, they're good. So that's
that
that's
they are.
definitely happened. But yeah, I think I have. Sure. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I listen back, and I do. It took me a really long time to get the guitar solo on my song, Many New Things, done. I did, I think, one session where I spent a while on it, and then was just like, this fucking sucks. Let's scrap everything. I'll see you next week. And then went in and just kind of, it's funny, like that. Sometimes it's just we're human beings. And anything performance based is you're gonna have bad days, and you're gonna have that miracle like good day where just something clicks and you accidentally play something cool. And um, that solo, once I got it, and we just did like a little quick editing to like kind of splicing the very end of one take to the whole beginning of another one. I was like, "Fuck yeah!" And that's probably one of my favorite guitar solos I've ever recorded on any project ever. So I remember thinking that and being like, all right, fuck yeah. I was just going to have to give this solo to Andrew, but it turned out okay. But I can tell you from my own, enjoying my own playing, that's very rare. So that happened
which
on this
which
album.
tune
I'm happy.
which
On
tune
Many
was
New
that, or
Things. Yeah.
something? Okay.
Yeah. My
Fair
song,
enough.
Many New Things. Yeah. Well, also,
Awesome.
yeah, I was like, at least gave myself a fighting chance to be able to hang on my own changes. These guys don't really do that. So.
Jump in, Andrew or Jonathan.
Sure. I mean, I like while we're recording, it's a similar kind of philosophy I have. Like, I try not to judge on the bandstand. So, like, while I'm performing or while I'm recording, I try to not like have the judgmental, like, this is good, this is bad. I try and just focus and just do the job. Obviously, to the best of your ability, you want to do a good job, but like, I'm trying not to like self-criticize while it's happening. I'm obviously not always successful, but that's the goal, is to leave judgment aside while you're performing or while you're doing it and just try and do the work. and then after the fact listen to it and then judge and stuff. So I've really enjoyed playing this record for people just because I'm really proud of the record. I think it sounds great, and just hearing it in different systems and seeing other people be like, wow, this is awesome, like that's given me a lot of pleasure and a lot of satisfaction. I remember also after we did a take of The Watcher, like just getting back in the control room, and Noam, our engineer, was just like, what just happened? Like, what is that? And I was like, yeah, man, it's it's cool. We're a band, just because that tune is just absolutely insane. And like, but like while we're playing it, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is hard. Like, oh, I have to count. Like, oh, this is like complicated. You're just trying to do the job and focus.
Well, sometimes
so,
we are.
Yeah, sometimes we are. But no, I mean,
there's
like,
a few things out there where it's like, and a two?
Right. No, well, actually, no, the Watcher we're counting. But it's like, it's just like, after the fact, I have really enjoyed how this record sounds. I think everybody plays really well on it. I think it's a really just good representation of what the band like is. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, and I would say like one of the main points of doing this at all is to bring music into the world that I feel should exist. So I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was good. So if we do it justice, then, and as I think we have on this latest album, then yeah, I can unabashedly say I think it's really good.
Nice. Because there has to be a certain degree of ego that goes into it, because you're musicians and artists, and there's ego. I mean, I write, and there's definitely an ego thing that goes into that. So I kind of enjoy those moments, or sometimes I'm horrified by those moments when I like what I do, because if I like what I do, that means everybody else is going to hate it. And when, I mean, who was I? Wasn't me talking to. I saw an interview with John Schofield, who was, when he was working with Miles Davis, he played something that he absolutely hated. Oh, this is crap. And he kind of went to Miles and apologized, and Miles just looked at him and, fuck you, it's going on the record. I mean, that's got to be an odd feeling, to go through something like that.
Yeah, especially with Miles.
Yeah,
that's kind of terrifying. How much thought do you give to the arrangements in the studio when you think to yourself, okay, we're going to have to play this live? How much? I don't know how much overdubbing you guys did, but how are you hearing that on the stage at the same time you're playing it in the studio?
Well, we'd already played most of the album live already before we recorded it, though this album was unique in that there were 2 songs that we recorded without having first played them live, and one of them is called Crossfaded, which was the first single we put out, and that would be one of our more straightforward songs that could almost pass for like a straightforward alternative rock song.
Yeah, I actually listened to that one last night, so I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then the other one was Life Cycle, which I talked about earlier with the Arthur C. Clarke lyrics. And so that one being a ballad, it was a little kind of trickier to think about how we might do it live, but yeah, it wasn't something I was too concerned about while we were tracking it. It was sort of just how best to bring it to life in this studio context, and then we'll worry about the live arrangement after the fact.
Yeah,
but again, there wasn't anything too elaborate to the point where it was much of a concern.
The live versus recording arrangement is something I think about a lot, just because I do a fair amount of keyboard overdubs on pretty much all of these songs. So there's definitely like, lots of layers, or like there's guitar doubling, bass doubling. There's different like atmospheric stuff that happens in different places. And live, I've got 2 hands. So, you try and figure out different ways to layer sounds, or just decide what's really the most important part for a live performance, what can be, left on the record. We don't use tracks. We don't use a click track live. It's just the 5 of us on stage playing music, which is different from a lot of bands that you hear. A lot of bands you hear have a click track, are using backing tracks that, help fill out the sound. So like their keyboard player is playing one of the parts live, and then there's 10 parts that he recorded previously that are playing alongside you. We don't do that. So we live just decide, all right, this is, like how do we just make the fullest sound with all of the most important parts? Like, for example, on Stay for the Ending, like during the unison prog shredding part, there's this background keyboard part that's like a sort of club beat, like ding 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 ding. That's just like a patch that I just held in in the studio. I don't do that live. We just play the riff live. So that's something that's a choice that, it's like, all right, well, what's the most important part? Is it this little background thing, or is it this unison riff sounding really full and heavy? So now that unison riff is like layered with all these different sounds, so it should sound really full and heavy live. But so that is something that I think about a lot, at least for live versus the studio.
I do think that the fact that we demoed a lot of this stuff out kind of informed both things, like which we don't normally do. So normally we work out the songs and we play them live, and then go to the studio. But the fact that these kind of all started as demos, like I was saying earlier, I think that kind of expedited the process later of readapting them to the studio, because I had already done a bunch of guitar doubling and how I was going to split up parts and stuff in the studio. But specifically with singing and stuff, over some of the first few albums, like I'm grabbing harmonies live that were recorded by Leslie and that were kind of written in the studio, like during the vocal sessions. And I've kind of taken a stance that I would prefer to do those in the studio myself, or be able to do only record things that I know I can probably pull off again when we play them live. And this is not a particularly easy band to play and sing the material at the same time. So I try to keep that, the best of both worlds, as far as not, letting things to sound too stark or empty, but definitely being able to play and sing these parts once we do perform them live. So I think that's kind of a middle ground that I'm trying to get to.
Makes sense. How much does technology affect what you do? How big of an influence is it? Do you have a particular piece of gear you like, or a particular methodology that surrounds your equipment? How much does that play into what you do?
I mean, that's the game, man. We're all tone chasers, just like the next best the next best pedal, the next best amp. I feel like I'm in a pretty good place with my gear right now. I bought a lot of gear specifically just for this band, so I'm pretty happy with it. Andrew's a sonic wizard. He's rocking that Kronos life,
Yeah,
and
when I can.
and his analog board that he brings, and his
I actually
dilly dally and his hoo-wah.
Recently updated the pedal board too, so that's been fun. Got some new pedals. It's technology really informs it when we're touring and when we have to use different gear. Jim says very happy with his setup. He has this orange amp that he bought for the band. And when we're touring, sometimes you get what the venue provides, or like the other bands don't have amps, so we need to try and track it down, or like the Watcher requires a separate guitar with a D tuned down to D. So like if we need a additional guitar, if we can't get that, sometimes we don't play the song. Or for me, I'm dealing with, like preparing sounds in the keyboard, in the computer, and using whatever MIDI board I'm able to get on the gigs, sometimes to very ill effect. Most of the time it's pretty fine, but it's kind of a name of the game of you get what you can live, or when we're driving or we're in our home turf, we get to use all our own stuff and it's very comfortable. But when we're traveling, sometimes you got to use what you're able to get.
Right. Well, like as Andrew had his malfunctioning keyboard stand on our first gig in the UK with him, I had a collapsing drum set.
Oh no!
Near Frankfurt, Germany, back in September. So that was a case of technology certainly coming into play and affecting the music.
Nothing more modern than a tripod. Yeah, the revolutionary technology, recent technology of a tripod as a stand.
Nice.
It's hard to navigate these new technologies that come along.
I'll tell you what.
I think my internet may have cut out.
You're
here.
still there.
Hopefully you guys can still hear me, so I'll just say that
you can keep talking and it'll pick up on the other end. That's
another thing with technology this time around.
How much stuff are you able to take with you when you go to Europe?
Oh,
Whoops,
sorry. Sorry.
That's all right. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish your
Okay.
thought.
I was just saying that this was the first album that I used Logic software in the compositional process, so that also led to some different approaches. For instance, when I was writing The Watcher, I had this section that was kind of like a slow, sludgy thing that appears like maybe 2 minutes into the song, and then I was kind of looking for some more material as a jumping off point for us to get into some instrumental mayhem, and I thought, well, how would this sound just double speed? Which would have been pretty hard to conceptualize without the technological tools, just because the rhythm is quite strange. So I was able to hear that right away and be like, okay, yeah, this definitely would be an interesting avenue to explore. So, yeah, I think that one in particular um, turned out differently than it would have without me being able to try ideas in real time and know right away if that was something I wanted to do, or if I had to just try and hear everything in my head, which I think may have limited the possibilities I thought were there.
That's cool. That's cool. Talking about Europe and traveling to Europe, first of all, people can't conceive of how unbelievably expensive it is to ship your goods. How much stuff do you allow yourself to take when you go to Europe, as opposed to what you have in the studio?
Yeah, I just bring a guitar and the pedal board and hope for the best. This time I did have a pedal board amp that I brought as kind of a contingency plan for the rando, club guitar amp that might not be able to handle the high gain that we need for this band. But that's the thing is like that's why when we're if I need another guitar that I can use drop D, like I'm not going to fly with another guitar just for the one song. So it's kind of like hoping for the best because it just complicates things so much to have even one more hand have to like hold something when you have luggage, pedal board, guitar, and Jonathan's bringing cymbals and bass drum pedal, and Tim's got his pedal board and his bass. So a lot of it is left up to the Prague gods and the gear gods of what will be provided for us bountiful gear.
That's got to be frightening because there's something else people don't grasp, but let's call them laymen. And even I've picked it up in my amateur status. There's an intimate connection between a musician and his instrument. So the thought of having to play this particular song on something I've never picked up before, that's got to be a little horrifying.
Yeah, I mean it's more the most with the amp. I mean this is kind of one of the only bands I play in where the amp has to be able to get really fucking heavy, and I need like tube. I prefer some tube driven distortion, um, and I've like worked out all these tunes to basically be like rolling the volume off to clean it up, but also having the ability to get into like metal territory. So like I'm just so used to that using something else or trying to use a pedal to accomplish the same thing, it's just like very hindering. So like um, yeah, it's a struggle, Cedric, for sure, but we make the most of it.
Yeah, and amps seem to be going the way of the dinosaur, especially in Europe. So it was hard to get an amp for him at every show.
That's interesting. I was not aware of that.
They're all using Kempers, man, and modelers and stuff, and I can get by with that technology, but it hasn't ever quite spoken the way that I am used to, and sometimes it can be distracting. That's the problem is like it's a weakness, I think, but getting distracted when the sound or the reaction from the amp isn't the way I need it to be. I start thinking about that, and the next thing you know, you fucked up a really hard line, and you're just swimming in the deep end without a life vest.
Precisely what I was
So,
thinking about. I I will shamelessly endorse my Boss Katana, but I play in my living room, so
yeah.
there's a substantial difference there. What's next for you guys? Are we taking this act on the road, or what's going to happen now? Probably after the holidays. We're recording this just before Christmas. What's going on next? What's happening for 2024?
Right. Well, we did take it on the road already to Europe in September. We we'll have some Chicago stuff to announce in the near future, so hopefully you can make it out to that. And it looks very likely we'll have a big show in Miami
Nice.
on March 7th. So some of you might be able to figure out what that's for. But it's not 100% confirmed at this point. So but that's the hope anyway. And then we're talking to some other bands and festivals about stuff later in 2024. So yeah, keep an eye on our website, district97.net, and our socials and stuff, and we'll be announcing things as they're confirmed.
Very cool. Very cool. You've got district97.net. Where can we find the album for everybody out there?
Anywhere you steal music from.
Well put.
Or Bandcamp if
Yeah.
you'd like to really do us a solid.
Yeah, you can download it, including in high res on Bandcamp, and CDs are on there. For people that like surround sound, we even have a download for that on our website. But yeah, it's pretty easy to find.
We also do
Awesome.
have a subscription series called the Inside the Vault Club, where for a pretty nominal monthly fee, you get exclusive content that other people don't have access to. There's like a yearly physical release with that as well. So if you'd like to get some other Inside the Vault District 97 stuff, that's the best way to get that and to support the band.
Very cool.
Definitely, yeah.
Like we've said, it's a crazy wild. It's back to the Wild West out there in the live music business. So we have found and taken the example from a lot of other people that do a similar thing. It's like that sort of Patreon like subscription service thing where you're directly giving money to the band monthly is really how it gives us a lot of ability to make the stuff we want to do, to go do the shows we want to do. So if you're listening to this and you want to support the band, the best way is to join the Inside the Vault Club and pay whatever $4 a month, and that just really gives us a lot of freedom to do the stuff we want to do, and the money goes directly into us being able to invest in ourselves and do stuff like that. So.
Right, and as Andrew mentioned, there's exclusive physical releases with that. We just put one together, a DVD called Toroween Plus that we'll be talking more about in the new year, but already there's only about 30 copies of it left, so anybody that's interested in that, you'd want to join up soon. And you can see a clip of it at our website. Just click on the Inside the Vault Club tab, and you can learn all about this.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Jonathan, Jim, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. And for the record, folks, Jonathan is battling a little bit of a bug, and I appreciate him taking the time to sit upright long
The
enough
bug
to
that
get with me.
shall not be named.
Exactly,
yes. Maybe if we stop naming it, it'll start to go. It'll start to recess real quick. It'll go.
Yeah.
We'll call it the Voldemort bug or something
Hopefully,
like that.
May it go the way of the amplifier.
but I like my amplifier. But that's a whole different thing.
Get rid of the bug. Bring back the amps.
That's fantastic, guys. I'm looking forward to seeing you on stage. It's great to be in the same town with you. It's going to be fun. Thanks a lot for dropping by. All you folks out there, please comment to these guys. I'm sure they'd be interested in answering your questions, any other thought processes you have. Meanwhile, since recording it before time, happy holidays to all of you, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you.